Hello and welcome to Star Wars, the best place for below average Star Wars. I'm your host Peter and I'm joined by two other hosts this week. First off, Alan, how are you doing?
I'm fine, Peter. How's you? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good, man. Cheers. It's good to have you back on.
Thank you.
Joined by another good friend who is joining us for the first time. Josh, how are you doing?
Hi, Peter. Yeah, good to be here. Cheers.
Awesome. So what brings us together this week is The Phantom Menace. Obviously, it was released in summer 1999. It is the 20th anniversary this year of The Phantom Menace. Me and Alan were lucky to be at Celebration this year, where there was a 20th anniversary panel, which was awesome, although we're not going to talk about that much this week. But I just want to talk to you guys, obviously, I was brought up in a time where I watched Star Wars on VHS, so I wasn't around when it came out in the cinema. I was born in 1989. So, really, in 1999, when Star Wars came back, like, although it's crazy to think now, you know, what's life like? Star Wars is coming back. Star Wars is everywhere now. But it really was crazy to think, what Star Wars is coming back? Like, what on earth's going on? Like, really did blow your minds. So I want to go to you first, Alan. Obviously, I want to talk about your thoughts. So let's talk about the years running up to before the movie's announced, and then your thoughts of what happened when they announced that new Star Wars was coming.
All right then. Well, where do you begin? I mean, Star Wars. I mean, I was born in '77, so I mean, you know, by the time I knew Star Wars around, we only had two films, you know, and then the third one came out on us, you know, and we, you know, as kids, I mean, you've got to remember at the time, not many TV programs or films or anything like that were really bringing toys and stuff like that out, but Star Wars was. So as kids, we all played Star Wars. It was really ingrained in our system, you know. And then eventually, as the years go on, you box it away, you put it away. Star Wars is done. On to the next one, Bag of Mice from Mars and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And you know, eventually then the VHS tapes come back out, and you're like, oh, okay, let's go down memory lane and watch Star Wars again. Then they've got the you know, the extended versions come out, and then all of a sudden a new film's coming out. And the thing is, you got to remember, late 80s, early 90s, there was two rumors going around. One was that George Lucas wanted to do a prequel film, just one film, that, you know, was how Anakin turned into Darth Vader. So we kind of sort of knew it was coming, but not knew it was coming, if you know what I mean. And the other rumor, which was a big one, was George Lucas always wanted to do a big TV production series. But he always said there's not the budget there to do it the way he wants to do it. And there's also not the technology there to do it the way he wants to do it. So, you know, I'm looking forward on that now. Actually, it's pretty exciting that we're getting all of that. So it was kind of a slow release that we knew that it was coming anyway. But to finally realize that there's actually a film coming out, it was like, okay, we all get to be big kids again, you know? And it was really exciting. I remember the hype, and everybody was excited for it. You know, everybody was looking forward to it. There wasn't really anybody around going, yeah, but there's not going to be a Millennium Falcon. Yeah, but there's not going to be a TIE. Everybody was excited for this film coming out, you know? So it was a good time to be in.
Awesome. Love that insight, Alan. Josh, I'm going to pose the same question to you. So basically, when did you get into Star Wars? Obviously, what was it like in the early 90s not having any new Star Wars? And then what was it like when you obviously heard it was coming back?
Well, yeah, I was going to say, you're making me feel old, but then there's Alan here from born in the 70s, so I'll try and refrain from saying I feel old. But yeah, I mean, it was my sister and who would eventually become, and her boyfriend who eventually became my brother-in-law, got me into Star Wars. And cool. I had boxes and boxes of the toys. I got the special editions on VHS. God, I don't miss VHS at all, actually. It was awful. But, you know, what you had. And, you know, I think if you could wear those things out, I think I probably got very close to doing so. I could pretty much say all the lines for all three films back to back as a kid. I can't quite now. I think that's either age that's done it or I just haven't watched them enough. But yeah, on the run-up, I think, 1997 was when the special editions came out. And I must have watched those hundreds of times. So I was really ingrained in the Star Wars mentality. But at the same time, I was 7 years old. I didn't know they were going to make another one. The internet wasn't out like it is now, where you've got the rumor mill really pushing around. I mean, yeah, there was the internet, but it wasn't like it is now, where you've got Facebook saying, "Oh, have you heard they're shooting a new Star Wars?" There was none of that. So when the newspaper started saying they're making a Star Wars, it was totally news for me. And that's when my brother-in-law was like, "Oh my God, we need to go see this," because he was excited as anyone else. I think he was a bit more of a cynic post, but at the same time, I was 7 years old. I was like, well, coming up to Phantom Menace, I was almost 9 years old, but I was still just like, "Oh my God, another Star Wars! This is going to be the best thing ever." So on the run up to it, and obviously sitting in the cinema, I still have the big Coca-Cola, like big plastic Coca-Cola with like Anakin in the pod race. I've still got that somewhere. The commemorative Coca-Cola thing. So I was a kid in the candy store for it, really. Just a wee nipper who was just wanting to see more Star Wars.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when you brought it there, when you mentioned newspapers, because I don't remember much apart from being really excited, but I do remember like buying like the Mirror and things like that, because they would come with little magazines inside that had like the breakdown of the movie coming out. I remember that.
There was Pez. There was Pez as well, or what was it, Pez? The little things you clip together, that because they did the original run. Yeah.
Yeah, I've collected all of them. I managed to get the whole book together. I was so chuffed. It's the only time I've ever done it.
I mean, hats off to their marketing team. They did a good job. But, Star Wars is never one to shy away from just, the toys and everything, which I definitely bought into. Because, I mean, I've still got them up in the loft somewhere in a very big box.
Yeah, because one of my memories as well is that obviously I had Star Wars figures from like the Power of the Force range. That was like the late 80s, early 90s range. And I bought those and played them. I remember going to Toys R Us for the Phantom Menace. The Phantom Menace toys were in stock. My friend's mum took me up, and I managed to get Qui-Gon Jinn. And now I didn't know who he was at the time, but obviously he was a Jedi. He had the lightsaber. We knew that. And then my friend Jonathan, actually, he got Jar Jar Binks that trip. So I'd say I got the better figure.
I think you definitely got the better figure. Yours came with a lightsaber.
Yeah, and I don't know if I pushed him out the way to grab the figure or not, but maybe he tells that story a bit differently. So yeah, it's 20 years later now from the Phantom Menace. It came out in 1999, same year as The Matrix. Pretty good year for movies, really, for like groundbreaking movies. So just for any of the listeners out there, we just watched a documentary. It wasn't a Phantom Menace DVD that was released. That's where I first watched it about maybe 10, 15 years ago. But I rewatched it recently. It is on the Star Wars YouTube channel. And it's called The Beginning, Making of Episode 1. And essentially, it's just a documentary Lucasfilm made about the development of the Phantom Menace. So we're going to talk about that now. And then after that, talk about our thoughts about the movie. So, I mean, one of the things I found in the documentary that comes across straight away is George promoting the idea that Star Wars is like poetry. It's meant to feel like it's rhyming. It's meant to have similar themes, similar styles. And although Phantom Menace is obviously set in a different generation to the original trilogy, and so it does look different and feel different in certain aspects, it also feels the same throughout. I mean, if you just take the Phantom Menace storyline, it is pretty much very similar to A New Hope, where, you have the end battle is a spherical station, gets blown up by a young hero. You have a lightsaber battle where one of our heroes dies. You have, if you look at the beginning of the movie, obviously the two droids crash land on Tatooine in A New Hope. On this one, it's the two Jedi sort of sneak aboard and land on Naboo, and that starts the adventure. So it has very similar sort of aspects. And obviously George has mentioned his poetry. How did you feel, Alan, about how similar it was and how it felt Star Wars wise?
Before we say that, I just want to say one thing. Does that not make you know how on the new films that have just been released, where a lot of people have complained that they're very similar to the original trilogy. Does that not make you feel a little bit guilty, since or that's where George Lucas wanted it to actually go? He wanted it all to be similar, and he wanted it all to be poetry. That's just the thought that's just coming to my head right now.
I was going to say the same thing. I was going to say like, Force Awakens was a bit like that.
Yeah, so I don't think guilty is the right word. I think, like George said it there, if you're a Star Wars fan, you know Star Wars is like poetry. It's meant to rhyme. So therefore, is it similar? Yes, it is similar.
Yeah.
It's designed to be similar. That is Star Wars.
The realization that it's meant to be like that. So just watch it and get on with it. Type of thing.
I think if people complain about it being similar, they obviously don't have a true understanding of what it's meant to be. Fair enough.
Yeah. I mean, going back to the documentary, it really actually brought back what things were like at that time, you know. You forget now, with so much technology around you, you know, that you had, if you wanted to do something, you had to make it. It was very much DIY, you know. And it's amazing, the whole take of that thing was how much of doing the Lucas, the Star Wars films and the Phantom Menace, it was still all DIY. Even bringing in the new technology now, which is widely used on God knows how many films, you know, it was still all brand new stuff. And he was the guy, and his team were the guys that were bringing it in. And it's just amazing to watch that. Even, you know, 20 years after the original stuff, he's still pushing the boundaries as much as what he did, and it was quite an interesting watch on that score.
Great thoughts on. So, Josh, what was your thoughts on just Star Wars? Obviously, the similar feelings, sort of the Star Wars' poetry quote.
I think don't want to rehash what Alan was saying about Force Awakens and everything. I think that was definitely a lot more cyclical, as it were. I think that's probably the better way to say it. Like, it's just the saga just keeps returning round and round and round, which definitely reminds me of some other sci-fi shows that work on the same concept. I think Phantom Menace is less a copy and paste of the story of A New Hope. It's turning some stuff on its head. It's reverting some stuff. It's keeping some stuff the same. It's introducing characters like, C-3PO, R2-D2, but very much separate. So I think, there's definitely some concepts that are similar. I think that's the Star Wars universe as we come to know it now is very much like that. And I know it's a criticism for some. It's what some people love, is that a galaxy far, far away can actually seem very, very small. But, I mean, I personally quite like that. I quite like how, because I think George Lucas has always intended it to feel small, because the characters you're watching, the characters that he wants to appear on screen, need to be led by some mystical force. And it is the force that's always you could even argue that's the main character. It's the force that keeps everything going around together.
Yeah.
That's what keeps it, going in a cycle. It's what keeps everything going back. It's why you've got, big old walkers in one film to another. You've got a lightsaber battle in another, because good and evil. It's just how it's always going to go.
Definitely, it's essentially modern myth. Obviously, myths usually tell the same life stories, usually tell the same life lessons.
Absolutely.
So moving on from that, I just want to talk briefly just about how much, in this documentary, how much fun George is having on set before, when he's discussing things at ILM, going through storyboards, and he's having a laugh, he's having a good time, he's also working hard. And I just think that's a bit aspect of George that's not really portrayed that well in the media. But I think this documentary shows George as being a fun guy, a serious guy, a very passionate guy, and a nice guy.
Yeah. The bit where he's doing the storyboards, and he's doing it with the markers, and he gets one of them wrong, and he just has a complete laugh on himself for it. You see it completely come through there more than anywhere, I think. But definitely, I think he's having fun with it. I think also a little bit I noticed, those who are revering him on the thing, well, maybe revering him is a little bit of a strong word, but they're like, oh, it's George Lucas type of thing. I think he's also, I've noticed a couple of times he's also like, how I'm just George Lucas. You know what I mean? And he has a bit of fun with that as well. You know, not majorly, but you can just see it in other places.
There's a great conversation that he has with Ben Burt, actually, the guy that's, co-produced, edited, did all the sound effects as well. He's the guy that does amazing sound effects. But he has a conversation with him about how his first film, or it might be his second, American Graffiti, just flopped. He made no money. And he's just like, he's just humoring, well, it could happen. We've just spent hundreds of millions of dollars, but yeah, could make 10 cents.
Humble is the best word, eh?
It is humble. It absolutely is humble. And I think, anyone who's a director, a producer, a writer, he's doing so many jobs. He's working bloody hard to do this, and it is his dream. As you said earlier, he always intended to tell more stories within the Star Wars universe, but for whatever reason, mostly technological, he couldn't. Probably also, money is also a question, but you need the money for the technology. But he always had every intention to go back and make more and do more stories. So he's heavily invested and he wants it to work. And you see that time and time again in that documentary when they do the first viewing. He's so invested in getting what other people's opinion is. He's critiquing himself. And some of those critiques, I think people take the wrong way. I agree with some of them, but at the same time, he's, you can see how heavily invested he is. And it's his baby and he wants it to work. And you can just see that in how his work ethic.
Yeah, and also it's I've just had the words in my head and they've just gone. It's he's had an idea, he's went into it wholeheartedly, and he's just pretty much hoped that everybody's got on board with it the same way he does. It's like you say, it's a love,
Absolutely, it's his baby.
So going from his baby and obviously how much he loves this movie and the things he wants to do in this movie that have never been done before, I want to talk about how Industrial Light and Magic obviously brings them on board, how he's given them the briefing, what he needs, and essentially what he needs doesn't exist. And I just want to talk about how ILM are game changers. Obviously, it's people give the prequels, say, oh, it's all CGI, and it ruins it. But I want to say, if you rewatch the documentary, yeah, there is a lot of CGI, and they did push the boundaries on CGI. But there's also a hell of a lot of models, hell of a lot of craftsmanship goes into this movie.
Unreal.
From pod racers to starfighters to droids, the costume design. That's all there. Josh, can you just give me your thoughts, please, on ILM and how they had to step up to George's vision, and how that led to them changing cinema, really?
Absolutely. ILM, if you look at their track record, started by George Lucas. He made ILM way back to make Star Wars originally. They've gone on strength to strength between, Return of the Jedi and Phantom Menace. They've done a lot of films, broken a lot of boundaries. I think ILM did, that James Cameron underwater one. Completely forgotten the name. Someone help.
The Abyss.
The Abyss. There you
yeah.
go. They did the water effects for that, which was revolutionary at the time. The physics involved, the computer power involved, just didn't exist. Because remember, it was the 80s.
Yeah.
They did the liquid metal physics and the robots for, the T-1000 for Terminator 2. They've gone, they've been big leaps and bounds for cinema. And then, you've got George Lucas coming in saying, I need you to do digital sets, I need you to do digital characters, and I need that to look seamless. Obviously, taking into account the technology at the time, I need it to look nobody's ever seen this before. And we have to remember, no one had done that before. No one had done a purely digital character. And, it's taken as commonplace now. But if it hadn't been for the work that ILM did, you wouldn't have the big leaps and bounds that were then made by Peter Jackson, Lord of the Rings trilogy, where they combined beautiful crafted models, beautiful crafted costumes, and pure CGI, and just melding everything together. It set a precedent that continues to this day. It's used by Marvel, even. They still use physical props, and even if they don't even actually see them on the screen when you're in the cinema, they exist on set. If not just to help the actors, it's to help the animators, it's still used today. So yeah, ILM were, and George Lucas sort of pushing them and forcing them and throwing money at them, saying make this work, set a precedent for what modern cinema is now.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I always say. I always say that you can't tell the story of modern cinema without George Lucas.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, if I was George Lucas sitting here right now, I'm not sure which thing I would be more proud of. The Star Wars universe or actually ILM. You know what I mean? I don't think he ever intended ILM to be as big and as great as what it was when he first had the idea. It was just a need to get the film out. But for what it's grown into and what it's done and what it's achieved, I mean, it's unreal when you think about it, you know? And talking about Lord of the Rings, I mean, one of the first things I thought of the Lord of the Rings is you are totally copying, I mean, in a respectful way, but the format that was done for the Star Wars films, you can see you've learned from that, and now you're making your own trilogy, and you saw how successful that was, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I think, Joshua, you got anything about Jar Jar's suit in particular to talk about and the development of the digital character?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing that's shown in the documentary is the pain that Jar Jar was as a character, because once again, had not been done before. You've got the likes of Gollum later, who's done, and I mean, God, there's so many digital characters now. Look at Thanos, purely digital on top of an actor. But way back then, you had an actor who they spent $100,000 on a suit, and he had a big head on top of his own head, and he was just told, "You do it, and we'll just." And they just sort of figured it out. It seems, you know, you get this impression in the documentary that throughout the 4 years it took for that film to be made, they just made it work. They figured it out. You know, after the whole 4 years, they finally figured it out. And what the conclusion they made for people who haven't seen the documentary is that they didn't really need the suit in the first place, at least not literally. But what was so helpful for them is what, you know, the ILM guys say, well, actually, this suit is being really useful. We can see the proportions on the actor. It helps the cast, and it helps them get guides on where they're animating. So ultimately, the suit that cost $100,000 actually saved them a lot of money, because and that's what sets up how it's done in the modern times. You know, as I was saying earlier with Marvel, they, for instance, another Disney product, incidentally, you've got Iron Man, Robert Downey Jr. The first Iron Man, they did have a big physical suit with a bit of CGI. And then after that, he still wore a sort of trimmed down version for the sets, but it was totally replaced digitally. But they used the same technology and the same ethos that ILM created just for that Jar Jar suit for that. And it just shows that, you know, as we keep saying, how revolutionary and how trend-setting, as it were, Star Wars was and sort of still is, with everything from sets and props, makeup, all the way to the CGI, which is obviously the biggest impact it's had, I think.
Yeah, and I just want to say one more thing as well. Obviously, Ahmed Best, who plays Jar Jar Binks, obviously his little hand movements, little shoulder movements, how he would walk, how he would step, how he would turn, all of that character work he did was absolutely brilliant. And because he was wearing the suit, the animators were able to take that characterization into the animation to make it seamless, and to really bring Ahmed Best's work to life, even though it's a digital character.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Alan.
I have to admit, right? I mean, not that I ever didn't like not Jar Jar Binks, because I think Jar Jar Binks is all right. But I have to admit, after watching Ahmed do his thing and, you know, make the character come to life and just, you know, the little bit of inspired things that he put in, I like Jar Jar Binks a whole lot more now.
You see the effort that's gone into him, and you sort of start appreciating it for what he is, which is just, it's comic relief. And you've got to allow that, as we discussed, you know, for kids as well.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So speaking of kids, let's move into Jake Lloyd, who was obviously cast as young Anakin Skywalker. Obviously, we see his casting process, and then we also see him on set. And I just want to say, obviously, it's been documented Jake's had some problems in his late teens, adulthood. I just want to say I hope Jake's all right. Love his performance in the Phantom Menace. We'd love to see him at a convention sometime. We'd love to see him come back into the Star Wars fold somehow. I think we get a warm welcome. But I just want to say, obviously, you see George mention about how he's working with such a young child, and he's like, George actually says like he learns a lot from working with Jake, because you see Jake where if it comes to a scene that's quite dramatic, he sort of nails it straight away. And the scenes that aren't quite as dramatic, you see Jake sort of ad-libbing a bit. He forgets his lines and ad-libs a bit.
Yeah.
And obviously George is obviously a few extra takes, and George is learning there about how obviously young actors obviously aren't quite as obviously aren't as what's the word, versatile, aren't as drilled as senior actors. How it was a learning curve for him, but how sort of Jake did deliver. And I think if you watch that movie, Jake's performance is seamless, I believe.
Natural is the word I would think.
He plays a kid, and he is a kid, you know, and as you say, it's, you know, he's got that sort of naivety about him that he puts into the character. This little kid from a backwater planet, and he does, as you say, because he understands that he's this, you know, little fish in a very big pond, and he just sort of transfers his own life experience like any good actor does, onto the, you know, in front of the camera.
And you know what I noticed? I was just watching the film again the other day, and I hadn't actually realized it or twigged it or put it together. But when he's talking seriously, you know, there's the scene where he first meets Padme, and she says, "Oh, you're a slave," and he went, "No, I'm a person." But he scrunches his eyes up, and it's just a natural thing for him to do, I think. I don't think anybody's told him to do it, but the way he comes out forcefully, actually, for the character that he turns into later on, it would look quite perfect, actually, and I'd never noticed that before.
Well, I think it's safe to say George shouldn't have to do that.
But he was just like really forceful, and like you could just see there was a bit of menace behind him, you know.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah,
I never noticed that before.
Yeah, definitely. I think obviously, like, someone's like brought up obviously something he's maybe ashamed of, because he can't help it, but
and he attacks straight back. Yeah,
and obviously it's quite hurtful. So yeah, I do get that. And obviously, like, when he's delivering those lines, like, "Are you an angel?" Obviously, some people are like, "Oh, that's quit. Like, that dialogue's not good." But like, I think he delivers that dialogue brilliantly. And I think like
there's nothing wrong with it.
I don't think there was either. I think like the way he delivers it is absolutely brilliant as well. I think you know, it's a mystical world where there's a species called angels, and they're quite beautiful. And he thinks this girl looks like one, and he's not particularly trying to pick her up, because obviously he's young. Do you know what I mean? But obviously it's just his first thought.
I hope he's not.
Yeah, well, he's like, I don't know. I've heard these pilots talk about these beautiful things, and like, she's beautiful. So it's quite a lovely, simple little scene, I think.
It's the sort of line that you would expect a kid to say, though. You know, kids are quite direct. Kids are quite, you know, they don't understand that. You know, if it was an adult who's saying, "Are you an angel?" in that same delivery, you think you might have something, you know, a bit wrong with them. But because it's coming from a kid, it shows that naivety,
the innocence.
You know, it shows that he's sort of, you know, he's from a small town on a planet that's not in any way connected to us as it is, and it seems to be a very interconnected universe, but they're not, and it just shows how displaced he is.
Yeah. So moving on from one actor to another, we got Hugh McGregor, who was cast as the young Obi-Wan Kenobi. We get a lot of him just signing on for the role, and we hear how excited Liam Neeson is to have Hugh on board, and then we obviously see how cool Hugh is when he's getting his hair cut, when he's getting his first lightsaber, how he is throughout the production process. And obviously it's fun to see that sort of come full circle now, 20 years later, and that's obviously re-sign on to renew the role.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of pressure on him to do that role. You know what I mean? You've got Alec Guinness that you know, eventually going to turn into. You know, there was a lot of pressure on him on that role. I remember a lot of people were looking very carefully to see how he did it. And I think he pulled it off absolutely amazing. As far as I'm concerned, he is Obi-Wan.
I'll say the same thing. Ewan McGregor is Obi-Wan. I think Alec Guinness is always just going to be a legend because, come on, it's Alec Guinness.
Yeah.
He's a legend for many more reasons other than being Obi-Wan.
Exactly.
But to me, Ewan McGregor, he is the Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
You know, and you see that same character, the mannerisms that Ewan McGregor gave him, whilst he didn't obviously provide the voice for him. You see him in the Clone Wars, and he's fantastic. And it's this really endearing character that's quite playful. And you do get that from the Alec Guinness, and actually watching the prequels and Clone Wars and just everything you can that's canon about Obi-Wan, you see that, and you see how it mirrors the sort of playfulness of a much older man.
Yeah.
As, you know, the Obi-Wan of Alec Guinness, that little smile that he does, that little sort of little twitch of a, you know, seeing Luke first time, he's just like, this brings me back, and you just get that.
Yeah.
And not to mention, you know, jumping down and saying hello there.
Aye. Yeah, he is. And also, I mean, he was very clever, I think, in finding a middle ground from, you know, like a completely different Obi-Wan to actually marring it up to where he would eventually... Because, I mean, there's a good 20 years gap between those two different characters. Those two different actors, sorry. You know, so finding the middle ground to mar his own acting up to say, well, okay, I'm not Alec Guinness, but if you give us 20 years... I will be Alec Guinness, you know, and he made that believable for me.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, I think it goes to show now where he's obviously coming back to portray the role a lot closer to the Alec Guinness role. Now I think it's going to look great. I would love to see him as a Jedi Ghost in Rise of Skywalker. I'm sure they can give him makeup to make him look like Alec Guinness and himself at the same time. I'm hoping for that. I want all the Jedi Ghosts in Rise of Skywalker.
That would be pretty cool. Yeah.
Got to keep the fingers crossed.
Yeah, I've got a feeling because I've just got a feeling. I think you're going to see him. I think you're going to see Hayden Christensen as well as a Jedi Ghost, and I hope so as well. I mean, it's turning into a Rise of Skywalker discussion now. But one last thing about it is that obviously you hear Luke say, 1,000 generations live in you now. So like maybe different Jedi Ghosts have been given Rey advice. I would love that scene. Why not? But getting back into Phantom Menace, I want to talk about Rick McCullum, who was obviously George's long-term producer and co-worker during the 90s and early 2000s. Obviously, he produced these 3 movies for George. He also produced the special editions for George. And he also produced 3 seasons of the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, which is a great TV series. You haven't seen that, for television as well. And obviously, he does have a bit of a rep around some people as being like, he always would say yes to George, and like he should have said no to George. But like, when you work for George and you get George's vision done, and I think in this documentary you see Rick McCullum portrayed as a hardworking man, a very well-driven man, and obviously I think like he would tell George what he really thought about things. I don't think it was a case of he wasn't man enough to tell George no about things.
I think in these kind of situations, to say no to somebody you don't want to be doing that, you've really got to have your own idea to come up with. You can't just say, no, we're not going to do that. You know what I mean? And then leave it at that, because the next question coming at you really is, well, then what do you suggest? Yeah. And if George Lucas has you see in the documentary and the films and everything, the force of the direction of what he was going, I think it's completely wrong for him to say, no, let's go this way, because he hasn't got the... Yeah, he would have lived and breathed it, but he wouldn't have lived and breathed it the same way George Lucas did, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You know, that's what I think anyway.
No, definitely agree. I think obviously another thing is that when on production, you don't want people pulling in different directions.
Yeah.
So you probably don't want them saying no to George. You want them like, we need to get this done. We're going to do it this way. We're all on the same team. We're pulling in that direction.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I just want to give Rick McCullum some props, because obviously I think after the Disney merger, the Disney bought out Lucasfilm, I believe Rick retired. But I just want to say thank you, Rick, for all the hard work you did on the special editions, which was the first time I got to see the original trilogy in the cinema. And thank you for the prequel trilogy. And
thank you very much, because those special editions were very necessary in order to expand the universe. Otherwise, it would have been impossible to do off those first 3 films.
Yeah.
It prepared the world for more Star Wars as well, I think. And I think that was definitely their intention as well. And they were well in production of Phantom Menace at that point, so it made sense to sort of get a new generation into the idea of Star Wars.
Yeah,
definitely.
I agree.
So my next thought is that obviously you see a couple of problems throughout the production where one's a sandstorm hits Tunisia and destroys the set, and they've got to get it back and running and get shooting. There's the ILM budget, trying to get the budget brought down. There's visual effects shots that they can't finish on time. And I just want to see how like calm and cool George is throughout this documentary, dealing with these problems. He's very calm, he's very cool, like I just said. He's very much a mentality of how do we fix the problem? Let's fix it and let's get our job done. You know what I mean? He's not throwing things out, he's not shouting at people. Again, just showing how such a sort of a nice guy and a great collaborator he would be to work with, and seemingly not difficult.
Yeah,
even though he's sometimes portrayed that way.
Just driven, you know what I mean? Like, to get the amount of stuff done that he's got done, you have to be driven. And he does it in, like you say, he does it in a nice way. You know, I mean, it wasn't the first sandstorm that hit him in Tunisia. It had happened before. So it's kind of like, well, what do you do? Do you scratch your heads and go back to the pub? Or do you just, get all these beautiful props that all these people have spent years making and put them back together?
Well, yeah, you've got to. He's. I think you're absolutely right. He's driven. It's as we've already said. It's make it work no matter what. And I think there's a moment where he says, "If I put my producer hat on, I don't care what happens. I need this to be made."
Yeah.
Because from a financial perspective, the money's invested. It's in there. It's being spent. We need to make this work. Otherwise, there's going to be no return.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think he imprints that on McCollum as well. He gets him out, and he's just going off after the sandstorm saying, well, crap, this has happened.
Mm-hmm.
What we're going to do? And everybody's just like, right, back to work. Everybody get on with it.
Because that kind of
these
thing
things happen.
Yeah, that kind of thing does filter through the rest of the set. And everybody starts picking up, right, okay, we can do this, we can get this done, So, yeah, it's cool.
Brilliant. So moving on to my last point about the documentary, that is the score. Obviously, John Williams returns to create the score, which I sometimes refer to as the language of Star Wars. And I think for me, I remember like one track particularly on the score was Duel of the Fates. That stuck with me then. It still sticks to me now.
That's a beautiful bit of music.
It's fantastic.
Obviously, it has choir involved, which is the first time in Star Wars as well. I just want to say, also, it's called Duel of the Fates. It's a big piece of music. And also, you've got to think about what that means, Duel of the Fates. So in this duel, you obviously have Qui-Gon dies.
Yeah.
And it leads to Qui-Gon making Obi-Wan promise that he's going to train this boy, which in turn is going to lead to all the events that happen in our original trilogy.
Yeah.
So it really is, in this battle, it is Duel of the Fates.
I think it definitely goes back to what I was saying earlier about how one of the characters in Star Wars that's not credited is not seen as the Force, The fate is the Force. The Force wills it to happen, We see this in all of Star Wars. I think it definitely is why there's that cyclical nature, and the fate is that this was meant to happen, The chosen one, however you interpret that, was meant to be in the position where he is trained to be a Jedi. It had to happen.
Even though everybody around him didn't want to train him. Yeah.
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 And I mean, if you look at Duel of the Fates as well, say if Qui-Gon lives and Qui-Gon trains Anakin, does he become Darth Vader? Possibly not. But obviously it's Duel of the Fates. Obi-Wan is not even a Jedi Knight yet. And then he gets made a promise, and then obviously he made Yoda give him Anakin as a student. So it's very much like this sort of event sort of shapes everything that comes after it. I think it's quite a sort of a hidden meaning in the title, and I think it's like both literal and figurative, very meaningful. The funny side of the score was, I don't know if you remember this, but I mean, it never happened to me, thank God. But so the album came out 2 weeks before the movie came out.
Right.
And there's a track on the album called Qui-Gon's Noble End.
Oh, brilliant.
So, whoops.
So anybody who bought the album 2 weeks early going, get in and got the album, probably had the movie spoiled for themselves. So that's probably why I know we're all crying out going, oh, they're not releasing any merchandise before the movie or not giving any books till after. That's why, because you don't want to get it spoiled for you.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if you guys remember, but the Star Wars film, I remember Yeah, we weren't in the social media age, but it never really felt like it was the secrets were protected as much as what they are now. I remember seeing a lot of images of, I mean, the famous one of Anakin Skywalker, and his shadow goes up against the wall, and it's Darth Vader. And there was loads of stuff that came out. I remember, it wasn't. I mean, they didn't give it away, but it wasn't as protected then as what it is now.
I think it's definitely not because of the internet now. Obviously, that's one reason, but another reason that it's a prequel, so you know where it's going.
Yeah.
Whereas now with the sequel trilogy, we're not meant to know where it's going, so therefore they don't want that being spoiled.
Plus, I think J.J. Abrams was still in high school. Otherwise, he'd probably have a different opinion.
Yeah, definitely.
True.
Because
now I feel old.
Because I've heard Khan's not going to be in the new Star Wars, but Khan might be in the new Star Wars. But sort of Star Trek joke there. But yeah, I think obviously, let's just say for example, if you look at how secretly they kept the Empire Strikes Back ending,
yeah,
only 4 people on set knew and things like that. And I think imagine if you knew Han Solo died before you watched that scene.
I'm not sure I would watch the film. I have to have
do you know what I mean?
would watch it because it's Star Wars, but
yeah. So you want to go on those journeys. So I understand why they keep it secret. Sometimes it does feel a bit too much, but they've got to do what they've got to do, and I've enjoyed it all so far.
Oh
so
God, yeah, it has
therefore they can keep doing it. I just don't like when they mislead you. So when I don't think JJ's done it with Star Wars yet, but in the run up to Star Trek 2, he's like, it's not Khan, it's not Khan, it's not Khan.
Everybody knew it was Khan.
And then it's Khan. It's don't just say no comment. Obviously, I don't want to answer any questions about the story. But that's all you've got to say. Don't tell lies, because you've set a precedent now, and people are on every word what you say. But yeah, I think obviously with the prequels, it sort of wasn't really a secret mentality. It was the teaser that was young Darth Vader. And obviously, he's called Anakin Skywalker, and if you watch the movies, you know he's called Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah.
And obviously, when the next movie's title gets released, it's Attack of the Clones straight away. I was thinking, Clone Wars, getting the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
And obviously, Revenge of the Sith, it's a flip on the title of Return of the Jedi. And you know what you're getting the downfall. So again, you sort of telling that story, you know, but you don't. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Whereas now they're telling the story that we don't know.
Yeah, I've got you.
Anybody got any other thoughts about the score, or in particular, or anything else in the documentary?
I just love the
scores.
Brilliant. Yeah, he just seems to hit it perfect and anything that he does on these films, and especially Duel of Fates. I mean, as soon as the door opens and the music starts off, you don't know what's going to happen, but you know what's going to happen. You know what I mean? He just hits the sweet spot every single time.
Yeah.
And I think there's a point where George says that this is the sort of song that in the third one we'll want to come back to, and they do. And they take little pieces of Duel of the Fates and they intertwine it with this, because there is this impending doom that he describes, and you do feel that,
Yeah.
There isn't a sense of ultimate triumph of good over evil. It's more just, this is the start of something much worse. This is the start of the story that will eventually lead to the downfall.
Yeah. And those beats that you're talking about obviously are replayed part of Battle of the Heroes, which is the track of Anakin versus Obi-Wan in Revenge of the Sith. Josh, you got any more thoughts about anything else in the documentary that we might have missed?
Well, there's many. I mean, when they're going over the sound design, for instance, I mean, that's just one thing I've taken a note of, because just rewatching that documentary again, the sound that went into the pod race, for instance, that's blooming brilliant. The power that you feel out of those engines.
Yeah.
But that's Ben Burt. You want someone to make amazing, crazy sounds, you ask him.
Yeah, definitely. The man's very skilled. And what about you, Alan? Any other?
No, I think everything's covered on it, as far as I'm concerned,
Okay, I just want to move on to then, just our thoughts of the movie then. I just think my thoughts of the movie are what I mean. One of the things I think about the Phantom Menace is that it's a perfectly paced film. If you've watched it recently, you never find yourself sitting there going, "Oh, like what time it is, what's happening." The story beats all flow really, really well until the end of the movie type of thing. Like, oh, what's the end of the movie? Be on a great adventure, and do you know what I mean? It feels like time's almost, I don't know, like you almost suspends time. If that makes sense. So it's a very well paced movie. I think it still looks great today. There's a few things that maybe look a little bit dated, a few, but not a lot. When it concerns being 1999, when it concerns a lot of technology was homemade, as you said, on DIY for this project.
Yeah,
I think that's absolutely
20 years is a long time. There's a lot of films in 1999 that look absolutely garbage. There's a lot of films from 2010 that don't look very good, and yet somehow, because Star Wars mixed up models and CGI in just the right way, that, as we've already said, has been repeated time and time again, because it's the way it works best for the most part. It does hold up. I know I'll keep going on about it, but the pod race, you rewatch the pod race, you still get the same thrill, because the best thing about the pod race is the way they did the design. It wasn't a futuristic car, it wasn't a futuristic motorbike, it wasn't a plane or a helicopter or anything like that. It was a completely novel design that no one had ever done before, that was still grounded in some sort of real world ideas of engines and physics and the sound. It sounds like an F1 racer mixed with a Mustang muscle car, a helicopter, and a jet engine. And you just, once again, Ben Burt combined all those sounds together in his team to make something sound so alien, but at the same time so familiar. And you look at that scene as a whole, and you're just like, your jaw drops, even watching it as an adult or a kid in 1997 not 1999 or 2019.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still amazing.
I always thought with Phantom Menace, I remember back at the time I was thinking, right, okay, New Hope is very much grounded in 70s design. How are they going to make a film 20 years later and make it actually look older than that, but still make it look good? And the pod race is a perfect example of that, because the first time I started, it's an amazing thing, you know what I mean? I was just like, wow, what is this? But one of my first thoughts on it was, this is like watching a flipping Ben-Hur charity, you know what I mean? Like Roman chariots, but with engines. This is just awesome, you know? That was my thought anyway.
No, yeah, that's a great point. I mean, George is a student of film as much as he is a filmmaker. So, 100%, he probably was paying homage to films like Ben-Hur's. You probably would have watched those a lot.
I just thought it was a stroke of genius. I really did, that pod race.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the things I love about the movie as well is the whole Nubian design, how sleek those Naboo N1 starfighters look. How
still my favourite ship designs in all of Star Wars as well.
Mine too. And how the Royal Starship looks, that sleek silver, the chrome even. And I also love the Naboo streets and the palaces of Theed, which I believe are Italian.
Yeah.
I think
as real sets.
The only issue for me is just something Alan said earlier, was just how can they make this look older than 1970s design. And that's always an issue when you go back to franchises years later. It's happened to Star Trek, it's happened to a lot of franchises where it's like, oh, this is 50 years ago, but it looks like it's amazing. And you can't help improvements in technology, but what you can do is do stuff in canon that works. So aesthetically it might look cleaner, but that's because really what you're seeing in the original trilogy is sort of the galaxy post-war. It's a post-war galaxy. It's like looking at Europe post-World War II. It's a mess. It's ruins and rubble. There's this totalitarian state that now rules, or totalitarian galactic state that now rules. So really, the fact that it's cleaner and fancier is more to point out that it used to be better. And then after the Clone Wars and after the Sith take over and the Galactic Empire, that's when it all goes down the toilet for the galaxy.
Kind of
like the way about it, and it works.
Kind of like you're living in a utopia, and then all of a sudden you're not.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely great points there. Anybody got any thoughts about the movie? That they want to talk about the things they really loved about the movie?
God.
Other than the pod race, I think we should say.
Yeah, yes, obviously everyone loves the pod race.
Yeah, I could go on for hours about the pod race. You know, should replace F1 with the pod races, I reckon. But I remember when Darth Maul comes out the door, and then it's a double-edged lightsaber, and everybody on the planet was just going, "Whoa!" It was
because
just
they actually put that in the trailer, didn't they? I remember that.
Yeah.
That was in the trailer, the double ended lightsaber.
And it was just like, okay, this is like just on a different level now. And even the fight act sequence, when you think about it, you had to get Ray Park to do it, and he's a trained professional, but it's just immaculate. It's amazing. It was so good actually that I was really scared to go back and watch the original trilogies, because I really didn't think the lightsaber battles in there would actually match up.
I think with that, obviously they don't match up in terms of the choreography, but the lightsaber battles do have the filled with emotion and intensity and drama. So that makes up for it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It totally does. You're right.
So one of the things I want to talk about just lastly. Oh, I think we've lost Josh.
Oh, no.
Hopefully he comes back on. Alan, just while we're talking, I just want to talk. How crazy did you find like going to see it in the cinema?
Yeah, it was great to be able to do that. I mean, you're talking Return of the Jedi. I was 6 when it came out, so back in the day was a little bit. I never went to go see it at the cinema, so we went to go see the a couple of the special editions in the cinema together, if you remember. And it was the whole thing to be able to do that was incredible for me, to be honest with you. You know what I mean? When you see documentaries go and you see, all of those kids, and they are screaming to get into the pictures to see the original stuff. You know what I mean? To be able to replicate that myself and be, well, not screaming to get in the cinema, but actually be able to go and see it in the cinema. Yeah, I loved it. It was brilliant.
Awesome. And Josh, same for you. Like, how did you feel going to see it, Star Wars, like a new obviously when you went and saw special editions, you already watched those at home. How did it feel going to see a new Star Wars movie in the cinema?
I definitely watched those special editions till I think they were raw, but just plain excitement. I was with my sister and my would-be brother-in-law, or maybe he was my brother-in-law by then, 1999, probably. But yeah, just absolute excitement. I was 8 and a bit years old, almost 9 years old, so just a little kid, but a little kid who has spent probably the last 2 years of their life, 3 years of their life, just absolutely obsessed with Star Wars. So it was my number one obsession. And seeing a film, and especially as a kid, a film like Phantom Menace, which it was ultimately, I firmly believe, meant to truly appeal to kids above, it was meant to help, service the older fans, but I think it was definitely geared towards the kids. You're just going to be, it was pure elation. I just remember seeing all the ships and just thinking, well, I think one of the biggest things I was thinking, oh my God, I want that one for Christmas. You want the Naboo Starfighter for Christmas. And I think I did get it for Christmas eventually.
Cool.
And I think I still have it somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
No, definitely. I think what you're saying is right as well. I think the reason why people who saw the original trilogy in the cinemas love it so much is because they were kids when they watched it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it connects you as a
I think
child.
this is where some of the criticism comes from as well, where you've got to sort of take a step back and think, pick and choose. Some of the stuff is going to be for kids. Some of the stuff is for adults, stuff about difficulties in international trade and blockading. Kid is not going to understand that. I remember just phasing out of that, I think, as a kid, and just thinking, oh, cool, there's robots. Oh, my God, those robots have energy shields. Oh, my God, those robots spin. That was cool. And look at the Jedi. They're really awesome. That's what you're interested in as a kid.
And then a few years later, I rewatch it as a bit older and you sort of understand those things a bit more. And it sort of all comes
Absolutely.
full circle as it goes on. Yeah, definitely.
I think before also on the film, I want to bring up Watto, because I think he was quite important in the film as well. When they're trying to do the credits, he's trying to get the engine parts, and he's like, "What are you waving your hands around for?" I'm like a Jedi, only money works with me type of thing, And that to me was quite a very massively important line for my generation, because it was really like a slap in like a wake up call. Like, yeah, you're watching Star Wars, but you're not watching the original trilogy anymore. So wake up, because this is new stuff,
Yeah, definitely. It's also sort of, obviously, you see Obi-Wan Kenobi use the mind trick in the original trilogy.
Yeah.
And you'd be like, oh, well, they just mind trick anyone, but actually you can't.
Yeah, and I also think if the Empire employed Toydarians, we wouldn't have a universe, because they are the droids we're looking for.
Yeah, definitely. Instead of Stormtroopers, just have Toydarians.
Yeah. Well, actually, those are the droids we're looking for. Thank you. You're nicked, son.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or if you want, or what they'd say is, but I'll let you pass if you pay me, because they'd take bribes, wouldn't they?
But then ultimately you might just have Alec Guinness's Obi-Wan just kicking ass with his
slicing
lightsaber
them.
just a few scenes earlier.
Well, I just seem to have a chance cube here, and freaking Obi-Wan's going, yeah, been here before, son.
Definitely. So I think that's bringing us to a close there on the Phantom Menace. Have you got any parting thoughts on the Phantom Menace 20 years on?
Just that it's absolutely scary that it's 20 years old.
I would echo that.
Yeah.
I think
it is crazy, isn't it?
It gives you a whole new appreciation watching the documentary, and I think anyone listening who hasn't seen the documentary, who is either side of the coin, maybe you think Phantom Menace isn't as good as people say, maybe you love it. No matter what your opinion, that documentary really does open your eyes. It opened my eyes as well, into just the difficulties that you have coming back to a franchise 20 years later, thinking, okay, I want to do everything, and right now technology forbids it.
Mm-hmm.
Even looking from a production standpoint, it's fantastic. It's not a perfect film. There are very few perfect films out there. I think, as with anything, it has its problems, but at the same time, it reinvigorated the Star Wars universe for a whole new generation, and I think that's really important. I think I was that generation technically. I mean, I wasn't born in the 60s or 70s to see A New Hope in the cinema. I didn't see any of those. I saw special editions, and you think, well, actually, isn't that better to see something like that come in and let a whole new generation enjoy that franchise and enjoy the amazing, massive universe that opens up? And it really did. Phantom Menace opened up, and you can see in the documentary, George, he doesn't for 1 second say, if we're going to do a second or a third one. It's like, yeah, when we do the second one, it's going to be great. Oh, the third one, yeah, this is going to link up with that. He's got it all planned out in his head. How planned out? I don't know. But he definitely had some very distinct ideas of how he was going to make this work over 3 films. There was definitely no, if this makes money, we're doing 2 and 3. It was just, we're doing it.
Yeah, and just on top of that one, I was always chuffed for you guys, like your generation, that you never had the break. Like, I still remember one of my fondest memories is Peter's first, I'm sorry to do this to you, dude, but your eyes, the first time you saw X-Wing battle, and they were like on stalks. You were just looking at it like, what is this? This is just amazing. But you guys then never really got the big, massive break that we did. And I was so chuffed for you because you managed to get that love and just continue it on,
Yeah, definitely.
We're a bit spoiled, I'd say.
Yeah, for those who don't know, Alan's my cousin, and Alan's the reason why Alan introduced me to Star Wars from a young age.
Yeah.
And that's how I was introduced to it outside of cinemas. It's crazy now to think Star Wars it came back in 1999, and it went away in 2005, and then it's come back again in 2015, and it's probably never ever going away.
Yeah, but then you had cartoons and things like that in the interim, you know what I mean? I don't think it really ever went away properly after the prequels started coming out.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think that brings us to the end of the show. I don't know you're not on social media because you're hiding from tax people. Trade Federation, they want to tax you.
They'll blockade you if you're not careful.
I've just seen one of Darth Maul's probe droid things going past. So,
oh god. Josh, where can people find you on social media?
I'm on Facebook. I don't post anything, but I am on it, and it's just Josh Wall. So say hello.
Awesome. And I am on Twitter and Instagram at Pete Hitman Hart. And don't forget to follow the Star Wars Twitter account. It is at Bors Star. So go over there, give us a follow, send us your thoughts, send us your questions. The podcast is now available on both iTunes, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, as well as a few others. So please download, please listen, and if you like the show, give it a 5-star review. But yeah, thanks for joining us, guys. May the force be with you.
Thank you very much.
And we'll see everyone in the future. Cheers, guys. Thanks.
Okay,
Bye.
thanks a
See you
lot.
guys.
Okay,
Thanks,
bye.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.